Hi everybody, it's Anthony from HNE today, and we got three things to talk about, mainly because the rumor mill is just going crazy and it bothers the crap out of me. The first thing being the Switch Pro, and I say Pro lightly because I still don't believe that a Pro is going to happen, but I have a theory. The PlayStation 4 back button attachment, I got one from Sony, and I'm going to show it to you. And then, of course, I want to talk about Game Informer because it keeps going through changes, and they're all in light of the changes at GameStop. So first off, we'll start with the Switch Pro. So if you are familiar with the Switch, this is what a Switch looks like in the normal deluxe version, non-light Switch, where the Joy-Cons separate and you can play games on the go, or you can put it into its dock, which looks like this. And just to show you, the dock, you know, you can see through it. There's USB on the side here, and then in the back there's additional inputs. Let's see if I can angle this correctly. I cannot. There they are. USB 2, HDMI, and the power. Now, the rumors are going nuts. They did last year too. You may remember last year Nintendo released the revision, which had the 20% better battery and the newer processor, which Nintendo's plan is just to casually release updates as parts become cheaper, and that way they make money more over time. As anybody who really is into gaming knows, usually companies release the consoles at about break even, in the case of Microsoft at loss for a long time. But I mean, they're businesses, so their goal is to make money. So I propose that maybe a Switch quote unquote Pro would actually be called a new Nintendo Switch, because naming conventions, and it would probably be the size of two DVD CD cases together. And we're saying, well, why that? Well, because it gets rid of the docking part, right? So all the components are just inside, and you have all the same ports. Hopefully they give you 3 USB 3 ports. That would be great. But all of these are on here. Now, the other thing I think they might do, because they want to keep the Switch name, right? So not necessarily going to be switching between the TV or handheld mode. I mean, because the Switch Lite doesn't. But what I think might happen is instead they'll do a kind of like, hey, dock your Joy-Con onto the base unit for your new Switch system, and then that's how it's still, because you could still, you know, maybe that would be how they get around the name of it. But I mean, obviously for the Switch Lite, they didn't care, so it's probably not a big deal for them. And what would a Switch Pro or new Nintendo Switch look like? Well, I assume just a brick. I mean, they don't do anything. Nintendo rarely does anything too fancy. The Nintendo was a box. The Super Nintendo, they're doing a little stylistically. The N64 a lot stylistically, and then since then it's been just pretty much boxes. And as I said, 2 DVD cases, probably it. It'll probably have a small footprint on it so it doesn't fall over, or maybe you can also lay it sideways. I don't know. I feel like I'm starting to describe maybe the future PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series whatever. Nintendo is pretty, like, it's just straight up plain. Now, during my time I worked at Nintendo, this is discussion amongst employees, so nothing to get anybody in trouble. It's just a lot of, you know, this looks like the thing it's going to do. If they release a new Nintendo Switch for the holidays of 2020, that's probably where Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 will drop, because it will make it a new Nintendo Switch game. If you may remember when they introduced the new Nintendo 3DS, they released games that were new 3DS only because of the additional power. I feel like that's just the way it's going to go. So if there is a quote-unquote Pro, new Nintendo Switch will be more likely a standalone, plugs into your TV, no handheld, but maybe it'll charge your Joy-Con. That's what I think it'll be. But moving on, this video was made possible by Sony here, and then the back button control, and they'll retail for $30 at your local retailer, or you can get it online. And the functionality is it's pretty neat. If I could hold this straight, you could read the thing, but you can look it up online on the PlayStation.com website, or you can also buy it. And I'll show you the device. Now, the control, the bit here is super hard to put in. I feel like forcing it would break it. I mean, technically, you're going to have to push it in because it has to overcome the grips on the back here. But just the nature of the beast, I guess, because it uses the extension ports and then runs a pass-through for your sound, so you can still put a headset on it. But once you plug it in, you turn on your controller. Make sure your controller is not on when you plug it in, and then of course you can see the screen here. And if you double-click, you can scroll through the options. And if you hold, so let me get back to one here. If you hold it down, then you can select, whatever. And then once you're done, you just click again, and it's done. Then schedule through your, and then the screen will turn off after a few seconds, as you're seeing right here, and it turned off. But the programming is still in. So as long as you don't unplug it and it doesn't lose power, it should remember exactly what you put into it, because it draws power from the controller. Now I did check to see, and yes, you can keep it plugged in. The controller can be plugged in, and the buttons attached, and if you never want to chance of losing power, hey, reports have said it eats up very little additional battery. I seem to agree with that. I haven't seen actually, it's not like I'm going out and measuring things, but it doesn't seem to be draining power very much. But again, if you're interested, I think it's great for people who play first and third person shooters. That way you can use your, see, I don't like switching my fingers between the triggers and the, whatever they call the top buttons. But I always have these on the trigger and I have these on the back buttons. It actually works out rather perfectly to switch weapons around. Which I think is what the target was for most people to be able to do that. But there's also people with disabilities, maybe that is the only way they could access two additional buttons. So it's great for that too. So again, go to PlayStation.com to buy yours or your local retailer. Now on to our final topic. I started with my gaming magazines back in the old days, and I'm going to show you. This is issue, I believe, 17 of Nintendo Power. Now back when Nintendo Power first started, they were pretty much just doing player's guides, and it is Final Fantasy. Well, I guess technically it's Final Fantasy IV, but they call it, So, and you can see this magazine's been beat up and it's been taped together. But when this magazine released, Nintendo Power was somewhere around 82 pages. Okay, so then when Nintendo Power finally got into his later... Now here's the last issue, and by this time, Future had taken over. Now, I don't know if anybody knows, Future closed up. This was the only official magazine they did, was Nintendo Power, but they also had an Xbox and PlayStation magazines, which also ended on the same date as Nintendo Power. Reason being, and here's my theory, Nintendo Power didn't want to renew, and they thought, well, you know what, if Nintendo don't want to renew, who's going to buy the other ones? I feel like they felt like there was cross-traffic or something, but again, it was December 2012, and people were using the internet for more information anyway, so why keep going? So this magazine actually has 96 pages in it. 96. Now, I found 96 to be a good standard for a magazine, especially a gaming magazine. I've had magazines with more pages and less pages, but 96 seems like a good number to me. But then we go to Game Informer. Now, real quick, I bought a PlayStation 3. The first time I ever had a non-Nintendo system that wasn't also... I also had a Genesis, but that was years before. I decided, well, I've been playing Nintendo exclusively for about 10 years at this point. So I bought a PlayStation 3, and I said, well, you know what? I'm going to need a magazine that also covers PlayStation games. So I actually stopped subscribing for a bit of time from Nintendo Power and picked up Game Informer. Now, this is an issue of Game Informer from, I believe, 2011. It's issue 186, October 2008. Yeah, I don't know why I said 2011. Oh, because this game actually came out at the end of 2010. I got the PlayStation 3, and so then I ordered this new magazine. And at the time of this magazine was 124 pages. 124 pages, and it's a wider magazine, and this is actually owned by GameStop. And for the longest time, I had years of this magazine, 124 pages, regularly a month, this larger format, fully enjoyable experience. The only problem I had was just pages of ads. Like the first, I'm going to count, like the first 4 or 5 pages here are just ads, and then there's ads sprinkled out through. But as I've noticed, time has gone on, they've gotten less ads, but also the book's getting smaller. So anyway, then we skip over to August of 2015. So the magazine, this is comparatively the same size as this one still, but then the page number is 100 even. And they stuck this way for a couple of years. It was 100 pages, a couple of years, 100 pages. So, okay, we move on, and then we get to this obviously smaller version, and this one is from December of 2019. Now, you're like, okay, so they made the book smaller. Yes, they did. But they also had 96 pages. And still a good book, a little bit less advertising, a smaller format, and I'll show you, to do it like this, you can clearly see the difference in width. Here. It's... And then height, there's a slight height difference. So the older ones are wider and taller. Here. So then 96 pages over at the end of last year. And then I get this. This is January 2020. And I'm thinking to myself, this seems a little thin. Like, what? Maybe something happened and they couldn't finish it before the holidays, and they kind of had to, because these things get sent out upwards of 2 months in advance. They sent it out, and they're like, okay, we only can do 84 pages. 84, so 12 pages less than the issue before, and but the same size. So the same size, but 84 pages. So they got rid of 12 pages. So I was like, okay, this is a fluke. Holiday time. So February is going to be back to 96 pages. February was also, just to confirm, 84 pages. Now you go, whoa, I didn't notice that. Well, you know why? Because you may remember last year GameStop, who owns this magazine, they had financial setbacks. It's just a number of them. They went through a number of CEOs, and their stock tanked. It's around $4.80 now. Don't quote me on that. It might have gone down or up a little bit since I looked last week. But so what they did was they cut half the editors. Now they've hired 2 or 3 new writers or contributors, but the magazine's just progressively gotten smaller. So it bothers me a little bit. They don't even make mention of it. I didn't see it anywhere. I was like, well, wow, that's something different. But then also, Game Informer now has a new plan that they're kicking in that some of you, if you're a member of their pro plan, probably have already received a $5 gift of some type, a gift certificate in your GameStop account that you can use at any GameStop only in person. So that was part of the new pro plan, and the whole deal with that is to get you to go into the store to spend that $5, of which you could probably get a pre-owned Wii game easily, or a pack of Pokemon cards, but otherwise you would have to throw additional cash, which is what they're counting on. And they're hoping that you'll buy pre-owned merchandise, obviously, because that's where they make the most profit. So check your GameStop accounts to see if you got that certificate. I have not yet. I did ask the manager of one of the local stores, and she said I should have it by the 1st of February. So if you haven't gotten it by today, then talk to your local manager. You may have to call an 800 number at some point. But if you're a pro member, you should have this $5 certificate. But because of their changes to how they're doing the pro membership, which surprisingly, they're originally going to do $25 a year. Now, I should point out that Game Informer has over 4 million subscribers. Barely 500,000 actually just people who buy it from the newsstand. So that is a pretty hefty base. And my understanding is that little brag on the bottom of their header says the world's #1 video game magazine. That is actually true. There is no magazine that gets that many subscribers. But if you didn't notice your Game Informer shrank, it did. And it wasn't just a one-off thing. It happened twice in a row in February and January of 2020. Just to recap, the Switch Pro, probably a new Nintendo Switch would be the best you're going to get, and probably holiday 2020 at the earliest to coincide with the release of Breath of the Wild 2. Back button for the PlayStation 4 DualShock controller, now available at your local retailer or at PlayStation.com. and Game Informer's getting smaller. That is all I have for you today. Thank you. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for checking out our content. Before you leave, please remember to click like and then subscribe. If you want to receive notifications, do not forget to enable them by clicking on the bell. Then afterwards, check out our social media at HasledgeNet and our website at hasledge.net.